U.S. President Barack Obama visits Japan, but his trip is not without controversy. A former Rwandan army official blows the whistle on last year's elections. And a social media giant announces change to one of its most distinctive features. Africa 54 starts right now.
Good evening and welcome. I'm Vincent Makori. This is Africa 54. U.S. President Barack Obama is in Japan Wednesday, meeting with Prime Minister Shinzo Abe ahead of the G7 summit hosted by the Asian nation. Mr. Abe is expected to raise the issue of crimes committed by workers from U.S. military bases during his talks with President Obama. The item was added hurriedly to the two leaders' discussions since an ex-Marine was detained last week and charged with abandoning the body of a 20-year-old Japanese woman who disappeared last month. Japan's chief cabinet secretary discussed the issue with reporters.
The government recognizes the gravity and seriousness of the recent case in Okinawa, the arrest of last week of former U.S. Marine in connection with the death of Japanese woman. Prime Minister Abe will convey the concern of the Japanese people and urge President Obama to take firm steps.
The young woman's death has stirred memories of the 1995 rape of Japanese schoolgirls by U.S. military personnel on Okinawa, which triggered huge demonstrations against American bases there. Prime Minister Abe has been trying to overcome local opposition to a plan to move a U.S. Marine Corps air station to another part of Okinawa's main island. Now, while in Japan, President Barack Obama is set to make history as the first sitting U.S. president to visit Hiroshima, the city where the U.S. dropped the first atomic bomb on August 6, 1945. The announcement has sparked a new debate on whether the U.S. should apologize for the bombing or if a U.S. president should even visit the site. VOA White House correspondent Cindy Sain reports.
It was a moment that literally changed the world. Some 140,000 people died within the year, and survivors and their children have faced untold suffering due to radiation poisoning. The U.S. rationale for the decision to drop atomic bombs on Hiroshima and Nagasaki was to bring years of Japanese aggression to a quick end, potentially saving many more lives that could have been lost in a U.S. invasion. But many Japanese see it very differently, saying innocent people were targeted. U.S. Secretary of State John Kerry visited Hiroshima last month. He called it gut-wrenching and said every human being should visit the site. Some experts think that should include the U.S. president, including Chris Appy, speaking via Skype.
I was very pleased that he decided to go. I think just showing up is an important symbolic act that many Japanese have wanted for a long time.
But Appy thinks the U.S. should apologize for the atomic bomb attacks.
I am disappointed that the president appears not willing to apologize. After all, I think in our personal lives, we consider it the height of maturity when an adult is willing to take responsibility and accountability for actions, particularly actions that lead to the suffering of innocent victims.
Others disagree, including Brian Harding.
The president will not be issuing an apology, and the Japanese government is not asking for one either.
U.S. Senator and decorated Vietnam War veteran John McCain does not see the point of the trip.
I'm not in the business of telling the President of the United States where to go, but what is the purpose of it? In some ways, you dredge up very unpleasant memories, but if the president wants to go somewhere, he can.
The president will be accompanied in the Peace Memorial Park by Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe. White House officials say both leaders will highlight the horrors of war and the need to work towards a world without nuclear weapons. Cindy Sain, VOA News, Hanoi.
Now, before arriving in Japan, President Obama wrapped up a 3-day visit to Vietnam, where he said interacting with the nation's young people makes him optimistic about the country's future. VOA's Esther Githuiyuwat has the details.
The president spoke Wednesday to some 800 members of the Young Southeast Asian Leaders Initiative network who welcomed him with loud cheers, American flags and a standing ovation. This is Obama's signature program, which was launched in 2013 to strengthen leadership development and networking in Southeast Asia. In personal exchanges with young audience members, the president confessed that he was not always very serious in his youth.
When I was young, I fooled around a lot. I didn't always take my studies very seriously, and I was more interested in basketball and girls.
The conversation was wide-ranging, from politics to culture, economy and the environment, specifically climate change.
And you're already starting to see the effects of climate change here in Vietnam. I think this country is going to be one of the most affected. And in some place like the Mekong Delta, you have drought on the one hand, but you also have saline intrusion on the other hand. And that could have a huge impact on Vietnam's ability to feed its people, on fishermen, on farmers, and it could be a really, really big problem if we don't do something about it.
A prominent rapper from Ho Chi Minh City, 26-year-old Suboi, said she faced roadblocks as a woman rapper and asked the president about government support for the arts.
Something like rap, which started off as an expression of poor African Americans, now suddenly has become a global phenomenon and is really the art form of most young people around the world today in a lot of ways. Imagine if at the time when rap was starting off that our government had said no, because some of the things you say are offensive. That connection that we've seen now in hip-hop culture around the world wouldn't exist. You got to let people express themselves. That's part of what a modern 21st century culture is all about.
The intensely personal town hall meeting capped a momentous visit, with the president first lifting a 50-year-old arms embargo and then making pointed remarks urging the Vietnamese government to respect the basic civil rights of its citizens. Thousands of Vietnamese citizens lined the streets to get a glimpse of President Obama, who said the United States and Vietnam are embarking on a new 100-year journey together. Esther Githu-Ewart, VOA News.
In East Africa, Kenya's main opposition party, Coalition for Reforms and Democracy, says it will suspend its weekly protests against the Election Commission to give calls for dialogue a chance. CORD, however, says the suspension of the protests, which have been staged each Monday since April 25th, will expire on June the 5th if the ruling Jubilee coalition does not agree to talks. 3 people were killed on one day in clashes between demonstrators and police in Nairobi and other cities during rallies against the Independent Electoral and Boundaries Commission led by opposition leader Raila Odinga's CORD coalition. The opposition accuses the electoral body of bias and wants its commissioners to be replaced. Electoral Commission members are dismissing the charges. Now, the Italian Navy says 5 people died Wednesday and more than 500 were rescued when a large wooden fishing boat overcrowded with migrants capsized off the coast of Libya. Workers on a Libyan oil tanker helped to rescue 135 people from boats in the Mediterranean Sea on Tuesday, only hours after the Coast Guard detained some 500 would-be migrants headed for Europe. The migrants were transported to a safe zone nearer to the capital, Tripoli. Now, those detained were from several African countries and included 3 children and 30 women, 8 of whom are pregnant. One African Zanzibar island is located off the coast of Tanzania, and it's one of the world's leading producers of seaweed. The aquatic plant like algae is the 3rd largest contributor to the island's economy. But as Sophie Tremblay reports, rapidly warming ocean temperatures are threatening the industry.
Sihaba Mustafa has farmed seaweed in these waters for 28 years. At low tide, she ties seaweed branches to a rope. She then plants the strands row by row in the ocean with wooden pegs. After 6 weeks of growing in the water, Mustafa returns to harvest the seaweed. She depends on the income to provide for her family.
The harvest pays for our medical expenses and for the children's school fees.
After the seaweed's collected and dried on the beaches of Zanzibar, it's then exported to Europe and North America, where the gel it produces, carrageenan, is used in common household items like toothpaste and ice cream.
Zanzibar is the third biggest exporter of seaweed in the world, but in recent years, exports have fallen by 30%. Zanzibar's leading expert on seaweed says rising ocean temperatures are to blame for the decline.
Global climate change is really affecting the seaweed farming here. The seaweed that we farm usually require water temperatures between 25 to maximum 30 degrees. But nowadays we can measure even 38 degrees, and such high temperatures will kill the seaweed.
Mustafa used to farm seaweed all year round, but she's now only able to harvest a few months a year.
For now, I don't have any worries because it's the rainy season and the seaweed is growing well. But the problems will come during the hot season because all the seaweed will die in the hot sun.
The seaweed farming industry employs more than 20,000 people, mostly women, and is the main source of income for many families in Zanzibar.
Every day you will find prices for other commodities are rising, but for seaweed, the price is falling. And that leads us farmers to get many challenges because we need to support our children.
Masuya and her team have been working with the Tanzanian government to come up with ways to cope.
One of the things that we saw is that if the seaweed is farmed in the deep waters, the seaweed can grow better in the deep waters. But for the farmers to go into the deep waters, they need the means of going there. They need the boats. The women cannot swim, so maybe they would need life jackets.
Mustafa says if the warming trend continues, she'll have to find another way to provide for her family. Sophie Tremblay for VOA in Zanzibar.
We want to know what you think about Africa 54 and the stories we covered during the conversation on Facebook. The address is Africa 54. And check out all headlines 24/7 on voaafrica.com. Find me on Twitter at VOA Vince Makori. Coming up, a former Rwandan army official's grim take on the re-election of Paul Kagame. Stay with us.
This is Green Beat for a healthier planet.
A chimpanzee is one of our closest relatives, sharing more than 95% of our DNA. But that similarity doesn't prevent chimps from being victims at the hands of humans. Stephen Ngulu is a veterinarian at the Sweetwater Sanctuary in Kenya.
There is a bushmeat trade in West Africa, in Central Africa. There is illegal trade in great apes. Illegal trade in great apes to Europe, to Russia, to Asia.
Sweetwater Sanctuary holds nearly 40 orphaned and abused chimpanzees. The ideal situation, says Dr. Ngulu, would be to return the chimps to their home in the wild.
They should be in their natural environment, but we as humans are destroying that.
1 million chimpanzees used to roam freely across West and Central Africa. But the Jane Goodall Institute says their numbers have dwindled to just a few 100,000 due to illegal hunting and trade and loss of habitat. I'm Rebecca Ward for VOA's Green Beat.
I am Sheka Sali, host and senior editor of VOA's international call-in talk show, Straight Talk Africa.
Today we'll examine the tobacco industry.
We pretty much touch on anything that you can think of. Politics, health issues, human rights issues, you name it, we talk about it. The issues that we discuss are pertinent to most people on the African continent. A very, very rare and unique opportunity to interact with their leaders.
Well, in business news, economists believe that Nigeria is heading towards a recession following disappointing data. For the details, Africa 54's business correspondent Jill Malandrina joins us live from New York. Hi, Jill.
Hey, Vincent. So the National Bureau of Statistics announced that Nigeria's economy contracted 0.4% in the first quarter of this year, and it is likely that the second quarter will not look much better. Africa's largest economy is struggling because its top export oil mainly funds the budget. Declining oil prices, shortage of dollars due to monetary policy, and pipeline disruption by militants in the Niger Delta region has deeply cut into Nigeria's revenue.
Now, Jill, is there anything the government can do? Because it seems like there has to be some flexibility, especially with the monetary policy.
Well, just yesterday, the Nigerian Central Bank announced a complete U-turn by adopting a flexible foreign exchange rate policy. It will also retain a small window for funding critical transactions and funding foreign exchange. More details are expected to be released over the next few days. So what does this mean? The CBN would allow the Naira to float against the U.S. dollar at the interbank market rather than holding it onto a fixed peg. So this should improve forex liquidity and supply and demand for exports. Foreign exchange illiquidity has been one of the key impediments, but inflation in the near term could spike depending on how the new exchange rate affects consumer prices.
Now, going south, it looks like South Africa is also kind of in a dicey situation, right?
Right. Well, the continent's largest industrial nation could potentially see a recession as well, for many of the same reasons Nigeria could. Just like with crude oil, metals and mining jobs have been lost as global prices fell. Inflation and fuel prices are high because of the weaker rand. This puts a lot of pressure on households and their ability to spend. And this is why commodity dependence needs to be weaned and other sectors like manufacturing technology emerge as Africa's economies transition.
Well, quite a lot happening there. We just hope for a turnaround, hopefully, in the coming months. Thanks a lot, Jill, for your reporting.
Thank you.
Africa 54 business correspondent Jill Malandrino reporting live from New York. Well, the Rwandan government says its citizens want long-serving President Paul Kagame to serve another term. Mr. Kagame came to power in 1994 following a genocide that killed hundreds of thousands of ethnic Tutsi and politically moderate Hutus. Since 2003, he's been elected twice, and last December, voters went to the polls to amend the constitution so he could run again. However, retired Major Robert Higiro says the vote was not free and fair. Major Higiro is the guest today on One-on-One with Peter Cloty.
The president of Rwanda has been able to remove term limits. He said Rwandans demanded it, and now he has announced that he's going to seek another term. Is this what Rwandans want?
Rwandans want a democratic and prosperous Rwanda. You know, they need the government to be held accountable. But in the first place, the whole constitutional amendments and the whole process of that and the referendum of 98% shows you exactly what happened. We have a society in Rwanda where the whole society is living in fear, and there is no freedom of speech, expression. Nobody in the country can actually stand up and give their own ideas of the way forward when it comes to the constitutional rights of the country.
But they say that Frank Habineza, who is the opposition leader of the Democratic Party, is free. He opposes the government. He goes out of the country. He speaks freely, and nobody has touched him.
Yeah, but what's the impact? What has Frank Habineza, the Green Party, what have they really achieved? They tried to decampaign the referendum or the constitutional changes. But look, what happened? They gave him between the approval by the parliament and the referendum date, it was about 4 days. Could you actually have enough time to go around Rwanda and educate people about the changes in the constitution and thereafter come to a vote whereby probably you're going to cause change? And it's not about the Green Party. Talk about other opposition parties, the so-called opposition parties in Rwanda.
But some of them asked for the president to run for another term because he brings stability, development, peace, among other issues that he makes people feel that they are part of a democracy. You doubt that?
Exactly. That answers our question. Why should an opposition party ask Kagame to continue running? Why do they have parties in the first place? They are there to challenge the government. Probably they have different parties because they don't agree with the RPF. But they are the same people asking the RPF candidate to continue leading. Why? Because of the extraordinary killings and disappearances and assassinations that have happened in the past, and they are still ongoing. So the RPF candidate, or the president for that matter, decides for each and every opposition party who is going to get a place, who is going to be in the parliament, who is going to be an ambassador, to the extent that he actually gets a leader of a political party or an opposition party and sends him to be an ambassador somewhere. An example is Mitari.
But the government said over 4 million people unanimously petitioned the parliament to have the constitutional amendment. And because of that, the president also said that Rwandans are free to decide what they want to do, and they decided there's a need for constitutional amendment because of the stability he brings to the country. Why do you doubt that?
First of all, there's no democracy, because there's no way we are going to measure this without freedom of speech and expression and media. See what he has done to the media. The radios and TVs we have in the country, they are all run by the RPF. There are a few who could say this and this, and it's just a matter of time here everybody is missing. Some of these journalists have been missing, others are found dead, others just, accidents, and so on. So once we can't hold this government accountable, once we don't have independence towards the branches of government, the judiciary and the parliament, then this is all from Kagame. He runs everything, RPF controls everything. The success story they are talking about, the economic story they are talking about is a fallacy.
Well, it's time now for a short break. Still to come on Africa 54. Will Twitter's changes attract more users? We'll be right back.
If you've just joined us, I'm Mariama Diallo, and here is a quick recap of today's headlines. In Niger, security and safety concerns grow for about 150,000 Nigerian refugees displaced by fighting with Boko Haram, who are living right now in a UN camp in Difa. In Zimbabwe, thousands attend a rally in support of longtime President Robert Mugabe in Harare after main opposition staged a rally last month. Finally, the UN World Food Programme and its partners use satellite data to help countries affected by historic drought respond better to poor harvests. That's all for today. Thanks for watching. We'll see you next time.
I wanted to present music and a side of American culture that is most important to me, that is a part of who I am. They're going to get some incredible performances. That's one of the things I love, bringing these artists in so you can get to see them do what they do. It's soul music, and that's what music is. It's that which comes from the soul.
Today's youth are not just the next generation of African leaders, they are today's leaders. And this is the time to invest in them. Today, not tomorrow. So let's connect. Let's engage with each other on issues that will transform our societies. Innovation, leadership, entrepreneurship, things that you're doing to move the continent forward, to make you the greatest generation that Africa has known. It's Up Front every Wednesday, 17:30 UTC, right here on the Voice of America.
Welcome back to Africa 54. Here's what's trending. Twitter is giving users more room to express themselves. In the coming months, photos, videos, and other media won't count against what is now a 140-character limit. The change is yet another attempt to make its messaging service easier to use and to attract new users. Twitter has struggled for years to find a cure for slow user growth. The number of people using Twitter is less than one-fifth those actively using its rival Facebook. Last year, it launched a channel called Moments that brings together hot topics in one place. And earlier this year, it tweaked its timeline to show tweets that users may have missed while they were away. Well, next up, high above the busy streets of San Francisco, something new is buzzing. Several of the city's top hotels have built hives on their rooftops to help the country's bee population devastated by disease and habitat loss. There are now 7 hotels in the area with rooftop hives. Organizers say the hotels were a natural place to put the hives on the rooftop space high away from guests and pedestrians below. You might think bees have trouble finding flowers to pollinate in an urban area, but beekeepers say it is not a problem. The hotels are using the thousands of pounds of honey they are collecting to create honey-inspired cuisine in their restaurants, as well as honey beer and honey-infused cocktails. We're staying in San Francisco. Hailing a cab just got smarter in San Francisco, where people are using new mobile apps on their smartphones to get a ride. But the new services have angered traditional cabbies who say they're illegal cabs, which are now regulated. A Lyft launched in San Francisco in 2012. It cultivated a playful image with its pink mustaches attached to the front of drivers' cabs. Users sign up with their Facebook accounts. Lyft describes itself as a community ride-sharing platform that connects riders and drivers who use their own vehicles. After each ride, passengers are asked for a voluntary donation based on what others paid for similar trips. The companies take a 20% cut, and that is what is trending today. Well, that's our show for today. Be sure to watch Africa 54 on our website at voaafrica.com. For more news, tune in to VOA's evening radio show, Africa News Tonight, at 1800 UTC. And in the mornings today, Break Africa between 0300 and 0600 UTC, Monday through Friday. Thanks a lot for watching. From all of us in Washington, have a good night.
Welcome to the Voice of America's News Words.
Does this word mean something good has happened?
Unleashed. The president is sending Secretary of State John Kerry to the Middle East to help build a coalition to defeat the militants who have unleashed a wave of violence that has included attacks on Iraq's Christians and other minority communities, and recently the videotaped killing of American journalist James Foley.
Unleashed means to let something very powerful happen quickly.
It is like taking a leash off a dog and letting it attack someone. In our story, the militants unleashed or set off a wave of violence.
Usually, unleashed does not mean something good.
So, the next time you hear the word unleashed, you will know what this news word means.